Okay, cool. Yeah, so hi everyone. Welcome to another one of these tech career uh, lectures. Today we have Jessica Cherney, who's a friend of mine from Berkeley, and is now a data analyst at a startup in San Francisco called Ironclad. And she's going to talk to us about like what data analysis is, because it's a whole nother career path. We've been talking about, oh, at Google, you can be a software engineer, UX design, product management. Uh, Data analysts do something a little different, but it's also a path that's open for all of you. And so I'm going to let Jessica take it away, but she'll be talking for about maybe 20 minutes, and then there'll be some question and answer time towards the end. Go ahead, take it away.
Cool, thanks. Nice to meet everyone. I'm really excited for this. And Alex is a great teacher and person in general, so you guys are all really lucky to have him. He's awesome. So yeah, let me just share my screen and share the presentation. And yeah, we'll go from there. Okay, cool. So hi everyone, I'm Jessica. I do data science and analytics at a startup at a company called Ironclad based in San Francisco. And we'll chat a little bit about how I got to where I am today and advice for all y'all, and we'll kick it off. Cool. So as Alex mentioned, I went to Berkeley as well with him. I studied data science and economics as my two majors. So I double majored, and I started off as a computer science major in an intro computer science class like you guys are in today. Didn't know what I wanted to do. I kind of fell into these majors. I originally started again in computer science. And I think that's just a great launch pad. Once you learn how to code, you can do a bunch of different careers. So yeah, let me just keep going on there. And yeah, so a lot of people don't really know what data science exactly is. And I'm here to tell you that it's a mix of a bunch of different things. So you start with kind of computer science knowledge of how to code, how to basically code in Python or some tool or a language called R. I'll go into that. And then you have some math and statistics knowledge, whether it's basic stats, like things like hypotheses testing and looking at different distributions of data. So I'll go into that, but keeping it high level. And then another little, this red circle at the bottom about that says domain and business knowledge. And my domain and business knowledge was my economics major. So I had in my data science major, I wrapped up my coding skills, math, as well as econ as my area of focus. Your area of focus can be a bunch of different things, whether it's engineering or business or sociology. You apply data to something, like your data has to come from some domain, and that's where you kind of do the data science and discovery. So what exactly is data science if it's a mix of all of these things? It's you employ all of these skills to kind of go through a mix of a lot of different data that comes through. And your goal is like an artist with a paintbrush, you're supposed to paint a data story with a bunch of raw data. And your goal is to create some sort of insight using all of these skills from data that comes in either through apps or phones or census data. There's data everywhere. So your goal is just, again, to define some sort of insight from data. And what do I do at Ironclad? So at Ironclad, Ironclad is a digital contract startup. So it's a startup, a company for our customer is the in-house legal team or any lawyer that is working at a company like L'Oreal or MasterCard or Fitbit. All of them need tools to kind of automate their contracts and have a platform kind of like Google Docs for their contracts to create contracts, review them, sign them, store them. So there, as you can tell, there's like lots of data from contracts, whether it's time to complete a contract or how many contracts does a company have. There's all kinds of data that we need to figure out from Ironclad's perspective, like work on the contracts, and that's what my role is. So I'm a data analytics lead, I guess. I run a very small team. It's only 2 people, myself and another data analyst. And our day-to-day role is involved with building dashboards like what you see here on the right-hand side. This is a dashboard. All companies have dashboards, and it's this view where different business folks at a company can have a high level overview of what's going on at their company, whether it's, trends in users or trends in product adoption, things like that. So we build these type of views for different business stakeholders so that they can plan better on their strategy for the year and see how their product is doing. High level, that's what dashboarding is. And in those dashboards we have product analytics in those. So you'll see here in this toy example, you'll see different types of product analytics. Like, if I'm Instagram and I'm an Instagram user, I want to see like how many people are clicking the save button on Instagram per post. That's a product analytics, or that's an example of product analytics. How many people are clicking on an ad or swiping up? That's also an example of product analytics. What kind of user is clicking on these ads? Is it, a teen, millennial? There's all kinds of ways to slice and dice data and like brew up insights from a ton of data. Other things I can work on is customer health scoring, meaning like, is our customer using our product in an engaging way, or are they going to churn? And churn means they're gonna just stop using the product. Data also, it helps impact business strategy. So if we want to see how a certain product is doing, if it's not doing well, we want to maybe pivot the business to not focus so much on this product that's not doing so well. And the role of data analytics, one of my favorite things is that it involves me to work with so many different teams. It's not just an engineering role. I work with finance and strategy and the pricing teams and the customer success teams, sales, like everyone at Ironclad. And I mean, I'm sure this is the case at other companies as well, needs data. So if you like to work with a lot of different people and you're extroverted and you can, you want to learn a lot about different parts of the business through their data, I think this is a really good role for you. And then obviously, I mean, since I'm a data analytics lead, I lead a small team. So that's kind of my day-to-day. And I guess, yeah, we'll do questions at the end. So I will just keep going. Cool. Oops, let me go back. So what kind of tech stack do I use at work? The languages I code in personally are SQL, which is a database querying language, and Python for my more data science-y tasks. And the tools I use are BigQuery, which is the IDE equivalent, like a text editor for code. And then I use Data Studio for data visualization to make those cool dashboards that you saw. And then I use a tool called Jupyter Notebooks when I want to write Python code and explore different data and visualizations in Python. I think also what skills are really valuable for this job include being analytical, having good presentation skills, staying really organized and on top of things when people from all different directions of the company ask you for requests. You need to have really good prioritization skills. And personality type, I don't know. I feel like anyone can be a good data analyst, but I'm just going off of my personality type. And I think it's worked well for me is that I'm extroverted. And I think that's really important when you want to work with a lot of people, when kind of put your name out there that you're a data analyst. You want to make sure you have like an open for work sign theoretically on your head saying, hey, like if you ever need any data help, I'm here for you. And I'm also curious and organized. So whenever there's a big strategic initiative at work, like, oh, we're going to be exploring launching this new feature, or we don't know how our pricing should go, like, can you help us? I think it's important to stay curious and volunteer yourself to sign up for those really cool, maybe career defining projects. And what is a startup? Alex mentioned that I work at a startup, but like, what is it? And I think the main definition for a startup is any company that is growing really fast. Growth is the center of startups. And Ironclad has been growing. I think it's been doubling every year that I've been here. And I mean, it's not only growing in terms of people, but also growing in terms of revenue. For example, like the money that comes in to Ironclad. If we want to like sell a lot more and grow a lot in terms of people. I have this slide it's kind of a busy slide, but there's like a general info section and then a practical advice. So I'll just go through general info about startups and things to know when you look out for it, which I think and startups in general, I think are great places to learn. And I'll go into that and why you should all consider joining a startup. So if you're the type of person that you don't know what you want to do when you grow up, I think startups are really great because you get to quote unquote wear many hats. You get put into a role. For me, it was data analyst, but I've worn many hats and I've done some data science work, data engineering. I've done a little bit of customer success work, meaning I've worked with different customers on their product needs. I've participated in pricing conversations. I've worked with sales engineers. So there's just so many different kind of roles you can discover while you're in a startup, because it is not that many people, and usually startups are strapped pretty thin. So you kind of have to do a bunch of different things and work since you are resource strapped. Another big thing that you'll hear a lot of people say about startups, it's a high growth and learning trajectory, meaning because it's a small company, you still have visibility of what everyone's doing. You can still hop on to any project you think can impact your growth. So, I mean, whenever I see anything interesting, I kind of be like, hey, can I sign on to this rocket ship that is happening inside of Ironclad? Like, I want to grow. And sometimes people from the more senior levels will just give you work that is hard at first, but the payoff once you do the work means that you learned a lot more than you would have moving at a slow, big company. For example, I interned at Deloitte, which is a consulting firm, and that's a 35,000 person company, I'm pretty sure. And work just moved very, very slowly, and I didn't feel like I was learning that much. So complete night and day between Ironclad and Deloitte. Not to say that there's anything wrong with Deloitte, but it just wasn't for me in terms of the kind of career growth that I wanted. Yeah, another general advice is depending on what stage of startup you join, work-life balance can be hard. Startups go through these stages and they're called funding rounds usually. When a venture capitalist firm invests money in your company so that you can kind of reach escape velocity, there's different stages. So there's Series A, Series B, C, D, whatever. And all of those are kind of complex to think about, but if you think about startups that are size 0 to 20, that's going to be pretty early. That means you're going to do a lot of establishing work, and you might work really late, might not be a good amount of work-life balance. When you hit 20 to 50, that might improve a little bit. And that's usually like Series B size. Series C, I think of anything maybe above like 75 to 100 folks. At least that's what Ironclad was when we hit our Series C. And when I joined, we were around 100 people, and we had really good established practices of basically like working normal hours, like 9 to 5, 9 to 6, and strict policies around, don't message people really late at night if it's not urgent, and just have this implicit kind of understanding that the work will get done. You don't have to, die doing work like 15 hours a day. So depends on what stage you join. Just make sure that work-life balance, you should look out for that. Another general info is how to stand out in the job search. A lot of startups are pretty resource strapped with hiring, and usually recruiters will focus on referral-based hiring as opposed to opening up a job search or a job posting and letting 500 people apply. It's really hard for them to sift through all that noise. So if you can find somebody on LinkedIn or Twitter or anyone, just to talk to them about startup life and network with them a little bit and maybe have them refer you at the end of the call, that's kind of a way to stand out a bit. At least it's worked for me when I was applying in college to some startups. So something to keep in mind, just really show your interest and be genuine about it. And I think it should work out. Okay, that was a lot of info. I have a practical advice section. So Since startups are pretty resource strapped and they also don't do the traditional really early recruiting like big companies do, you'll see a lot of startup postings for jobs in the spring, like in April or March, because they're focusing on the next quarter. Startups mentalities is always like focusing on what's in the current or next quarter. It's really hard to predict a full year out in advance because things change all the time. It's a high growth company. So recruiting in the spring, look out for that. Don't stress if you don't have a internship or full-time role in the fall. Another thing is sometimes startups will give you a lower salary in exchange for more equity. And what is equity? Equity is, it's a kind of complex concept, but it's basically partial ownership of the company via something like stock or options. And those are like some kind of complex words sometimes that I personally didn't know when I was 18 or 19. But Carta has some really good examples of what equity is. And I highly suggest you guys read those articles from Carta after this. I'm not going to go into it, but just something to keep in mind that you might be paid a little bit less than compared at maybe Google. But hopefully, if you have more equity, if your company that you're at eventually goes public or gets acquired, you're going to make a lot of more money later. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, just general advice. I would really just hope that all of you guys use your potential, take hard classes, be part of clubs that challenge you, do different things to find out what you're good at, what you're not. Pick your friends wisely. I think your peer group really determines who you are. There's this cliche that you are the sum or an average of the 5 closest people in your life. So, and I hope that means you're hanging out with some good friends and people who are ambitious like you and don't pull you down. You want people that you hang out with that are also in the same kind of ambitious realm. So, the third bullet point, work hard, is kind of in the same realm as the first bullet point. And then 4, just make sure to have fun in college. Like college is it can be really stressful with all like the midterms and tests and deadlines and recruiting, but just make sure to soak up a little bit of fun when you're out with your friends and meet new people and go to cool restaurants, explore the city you're in. Just make sure to have fun while you're in college, or else you're going to look back and be like, wow, I didn't really meet anyone or make any memorable experiences. And I think that's really important also, just to have balance in your life. Cool. This is just me saying, you got this to you guys. And yeah, I know that was pretty quick, but we would love to leave it open for some questions on some of the things I kind of touched on and skimmed over. So open for some Q&A. I can exit out of this. Cool.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. Yeah, so does anyone have any questions? You can raise your hand or just unmute. It's a small enough group here. Jessica gave a lot of really, really good, like actionable distilled advice, but also like about data analysts as a role, about startups, about just school advice. Does anyone have any follow-up questions for her? Yeah, Ashley?
How did you get into being like a data analyst, and like what can we do to maybe like form an interest in it or get started in data analytics?
Yeah, I took an intro to data science class at school. There was no data science major at that point. It was just intro to data, and it was a class of maybe 500 people. So I really recommend just figuring out if there's a class similar to Howard or at Howard, just trying it out. And then as far as like getting my role, I was part of this mentorship program in school, same as that's how I met Alex. And my mentor suggested that I check out Ironclad and interview with them. So he kind of gave me a de facto referral. So that's how I got into my current role.
Okay, thank you.
And Jessica, I'll add on, other people might be curious. What about non-data science? Like what other classes, like is statistics that they should know well, or like a Python class? What other things should they know?
Right. I totally skipped over that in my presentation. I think the most important classes are those intro to Python, R, and SQL. Those data structure classes are really important, at least just to have an idea of basic software engineering concepts, because those come up in the data science / data analytics world. Things like using Git or documentation or like writing clean code, commenting, sharing things. Those are, and understanding basic data structures like, I don't know, like lists, arrays, stacks, keys. Sometimes those are important, as well as linear algebra. I think that's really important. In data science, you process a lot of tables, and they kind of function as these things called matrices, which you learn about in linear algebra. So just understanding the basics of that, because a lot of machine learning uses matrix math. So understanding that. I also thought upper division stats and probability were really helpful, beyond the basic like undergrad level or underclassmen level. And I thought econometrics was also super interesting because it's using economics data and using stats concepts on economics problems to kind of yield some sort of insight from economics data. Like, for example, you can get like census data and figure out, or, data on obesity and figure out, is there like a statistical difference between, I don't know, populations that are from a certain area or state, and seeing if there's, a higher chance of obesity because of where they live. I don't know. So it's things like that. Econometrics that I would really recommend.
And the matrices that Jessica was talking about, that's very similar, guys, to what we did in our image project, dealing with two-dimensional arrays and thinking about like rows of data and how you're going to go through and work with them. So it's those concepts that'll keep coming back up. I see Richard had a question, and then Jonathan will be next. Richard says, thanks, Jessica. I've browsed job postings for entry-level data analytics and see majority of them requiring 1 to 2 years of experience. How did you get your foot into the door fresh out of college, or even your first internship?
Yeah, that's true. But 1 to 2 years of experience is just basically, I made up for it by doing data analytics consulting at school. We had clubs where you can sign up and do free consulting for businesses in terms of whatever data problems they were facing. So if you can join any pre-professional clubs like that, you can get those 1 to 2 years of experience. It's basically, or if you do any undergraduate research in Python or SQL or any of these skills, they basically say 1 to 2 years of experience, but don't let that stop you from applying. I also did part of those 1 to 2 years experience. I did do internships at some companies. Like I did a data analytics internship at Seagate. I actually skipped over it in my slide, but let me just share. I totally accidentally skipped over it, but I highly recommend you do internships to get experience. So I was a data analytics intern in my sophomore year. In my freshman year, I was a mobile engineering intern. And then in my senior year or junior year, I was a strategy and data analytics consultant intern. It was just like all over the place, but kind of really recommend everyone to try to get some experience through internships, because I think that really stands out on a resume. Like most people, when they hire people full time, they want to know that you have some experience interning and being in a business setting before.
And Jonathan, before we take your question, a follow-up for you, Jessica, how did you get that first freshman year internship? Or like, how did you, when you have no experience?
It's all referral driven. Like a lot of people get it through just like knowing somebody, or I chatted with someone on LinkedIn, like DM'd them and was like, hey, I have experience in mobile engineering or mobile like iOS development, and would love to work on your team. And then most people are really recipient or are well received that, because it kind of shows you have initiative and you're on the hunt, you're playing offense with your career. My second internship I got, and second and third internship I got by applying to jobs via our school's job portal.
Yeah, and I want to point out something that Jessica said to make sure you guys don't take, like when Jessica talks about getting referrals, it's not to mean like, oh, you needed someone on the inside, you have to already have a bunch of friends. It's more the idea of like, hey, if you reach out like on LinkedIn, or if you look up your ask for alumni or recent graduates and find someone who has something in common with you, and you reach out and say, hey, I'm a freshman, I'm interested in this kind of role, can you tell me about it? And then chat with them, and after that ask them for a referral. 9 times out of 10, like they'll say yes, because they remember they were in your shoes. If you can find someone who's a Howard grad or from the same city that you're from, and you can mention something they have in common, they'll be much more likely to want to help, and then you can get a referral through that.
Yeah, I would also recommend like doing a coffee chat with that person and getting to know them and their career and what they do before asking for a referral. Otherwise, it'll come off kind of like snaky, like, hey, I'm just meeting you just for a referral. It would be nice if you showed like genuine interest in them and the company before you do that. So just throwing that out there.
Great. Jonathan?
Hi, you spoke a little bit about like some general applications in like data science and data analytics with respect to like math courses. Um, could you maybe expand on like some other math courses that might have some applications in your field, like whether it be something like combinatorics or like numerical analysis or anything like that?
None from like my experience. I don't use honestly that much math in my day-to-day data analytics job. Like I learn a lot of math, but a lot of the statistical work that I do, it's all through packages in Python that do the work for me now. It's really helpful to understand how that stuff is computed from my previous experience, but just like to gut check, like it's not a black box type of thing. But I don't, in my, I guess, practical data analytics job, it's not, I don't use advanced mathematics. This might be different for in-house researchers or like data, like core data scientists who use more advanced methodologies to do their data science work, but I personally don't.
Thank you.
I see another question from Richard. Have you attended a data-centered hackathon? Would you recommend doing them, or are you better off doing personal projects to pad your resume? Richard has done several SWE hackathons and loved them.
I personally don't like hackathons. I really am not productive after a couple of hours, and I don't like staying up late. So I personally would say personal projects, because personal projects, they're more drawn out. Like you can build upon it a lot more. With hackathons, it's really fast, very high turnaround, and you kind of you kind of build a proof of concept as opposed to a full blown out project sometimes. So teach their own. I personally would recommend personal project, but if you win a hackathon that's data centered, like put that on your resume, because that's really good and will make you stand out. But again, teach their own.
To give context here, many students of our freshmen won't know what a hackathon is because there haven't been any at Howard yet.
Okay.
COVID. So for like these hackathons are, you get together with some friends and some companies come together or some sponsors come together and they give some challenge or some area you should work in or some technology you should use. And then you have maybe 48 hours or 72 hours to build something. And so I think I'm on Team Jessica here, like Jessica's side of the argument. Some people really like this idea of I'm going to sit down, I'm going to work for the next 48 hours and take a 5-hour nap in between and drink 5-hour energies and try to pump something out. I find it really hard. I find it really hard like working that way. So I don't personally really like hackathons, but some people love them. And the idea for them is like, I'm going to hack something together and see just how far I can go from nothing to something like in 48 hours. You guys will have some here. I think there is Jonathan or is Vijay on here? Do you guys normally have a hackathon in years past? I think someone told me you do, right?
Yeah, there's a Howard hackathon, but also to I know that like different companies, like it usually happens next semester,
Okay.
you get an email advertising it and you could enter and you can choose your team and everything. And had it not been for the pandemic, I believe that the Howard hackathon, when it's in person, like you can go and just spectate and see how everyone's doing and everything.
Yeah, and it's a great place. You all should try it at least once, just to meet some people, see what that whole hackathon-y vibe is. If you like it, great. If you don't have to do it again, but give it a try.
Yeah, totally agree. Everything is worth a shot just to see how you like it in the actual moment. Jonathan, you have your hand raised?
Oh, sorry, that was from before.
Okay, cool. I thought you had another question.
All right, in that case, last round. Anyone, last call. Any other questions?
If you do have any questions, feel free to email me. And also, if you're a woman interested in data, I run a women in data community on Slack called Data Angels. So feel free to reach out to me on there as well. But yeah, you can just look me up on LinkedIn and we can chat.
Richard actually has one more question in chat, which is, what are the best resources for interview prep, and what's a traditional interview like?
Oh, okay. Let me try to actually link something to see if I have good interview prep. My sister wrote up a document that my sister's also a data analyst. So let me just quickly look up her resources. 1 second. I'm having trouble multitasking. And while I look at that, okay, I'm gonna link it here in this chat. So my sister wrote up this awesome document and it goes through, I can share my screen 1 second. So here's this beautiful document she wrote. If you ever want to learn SQL, I really recommend Mode Analytics. They have really clear tutorials on SQL and all parts of easy, intermediate, and difficult SQL. SQL Zoo also helps you with practice exercises. So usually in the very introductory stage of interviewing, you'll do a SQL test. Somebody will prompt you like, hey, get me the tables that output, number of flavors of ice cream or number of ice creams per flavor of ice cream. And you'll have to do that. So that's that on the SQL side. Sometimes you'll be asked about A/B testing. I've never been asked, so don't worry about that. I'll tell you what we do with Ironclad. We do a SQL test and then we give a take-home assignment. And usually the take-home assignment involves some files of unstructured data. And it's your job to kind of explore the data, weave together and join across multiple tables to answer some sort of business question and present your top findings in a slideshow presentation. And then you present it on your on-site interview. And then another one would be like a case question where you're presented with like a toy example of like Ironclad is trying to expand internationally. What data would you want to gather and what questions would you ask from the customer success, sales, and product team to expand internationally? And we want to like see you kind of whiteboard your answers of like what metrics would you collect, what questions would you want to know to further deepen your insights and analysis. So that's just some toy example. I really recommend looking at the interview guide and also the one that Alex.
That is the same one. Just for people who are watching this on video who can't see the chat, you can go to shortle.io/data-analyst-guide. That's data-analyst-guide.
Cool. Nice. Thanks, everyone. Yeah. Do you prefer to reach you through email or through LinkedIn? Let's do LinkedIn or whatever you want. I'll respond probably quicker to LinkedIn. I don't like emails as much, but
Jonathan, I see you have a question.
Yeah, so if like someone who's new to like using Python and like the various modules to like work with data, what are some like interesting elementary ideas for projects that we could work on just to get familiar and to practice a bit?
Great question. Let me share my screen again. Let me look up before I share my screen. I should look this up. So you can find a bunch of really good projects to look up on Kaggle. Kaggle has a bunch of data sets and competitions that you can look through. If Kaggle isn't your best friend, there's a bunch of really cool data sets available that you can just download and you can just play around with them. So it's called Tidy Tuesday. And I'll link this as well. So it's this really cool, I don't know who gathers this data, but every year and every week, somebody publishes data on so many different topics. This HBCU enrollment, really cool. Shout out Howard. But there's things like Netflix titles, like New York City restaurants, Friends episodes. So there's so many data sets that if you're interested in, you'll find something that you like here. And you can go through different years as well. Like it's not just 2021, it's from all the way back to 2018. So let me just link that as well. And I would recommend just opening up one of these data sets and just exploring it. Like do whatever you want, like follow some modules of Python tutorials. Like if you've never built a histogram or a bar chart in Python, use that, like, whatever data that you pull that's to your interest and just practice on that data set. Like, hey, let's do Python py.plot movie titles over time, and just see if you can like build a cohesive project that's based on your exploratory data analysis.
And for people watching the video, that's shortle.io/data-sets. And I'll put those in the description of the video.
Yeah, and then I'll also link Kaggle.com as well. On Kaggle, you can see people's code, and like you can see how certain people did do some exploratory data analysis. So here's an example. Maybe if you ever want to see examples of how people use Python, you can basically see based off of hotness. I don't know, let's see, hotness, most votes. Let's wait for this to load. Oh, this one's really famous. This comprehensive data exploration with Python. There's this guy, he's an Italian, I forget his name. Yeah, Pedro Marcelino, or he might be Brazilian. But there's examples of code snippets of people writing in Python and how they explore that you can just, I don't say copy and paste, but you can take liberties with what you want to do with your data and inspiration from Kaggle. It's awesome. I highly recommend people read through it, and do their own visualizations. It's so cool. It's just like a great skill. So highly recommend Kaggle.
All right, if there aren't any other questions, we can, any last minute questions? No?
The
All right.
questions have been all great.
Last minute follow-up question.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about like ethics with respect to data and like what data we should use, what data we should be able to access, and in terms of it, like for example, let's say some company has like a breach and a lot of their data is released to the public. Do you think it's okay to use data that you wouldn't have access to had it not been for that breach?
No, yeah, I wouldn't. I would only use like publicly vetted data sets. Part of the graduate requirement for graduating with a data science degree is to take an ethics class, and they're really good and help form your way of thinking. So I wouldn't use any personal identifiable information in your data sources if you can avoid it, unless it's like publicly released and things are anonymized. Like, I don't know, maybe like location's not anonymized, but the person's name is, and it's from a reputable source. I'd be fine with using that, but if it's from a breach, definitely don't use it. The links that I sent, or the Tidy Tuesday data sets, are all, I think, vetted. So I'd recommend those.
And I'll chime in and share Google's perspective on this. At Google, we deal with lots of user data, but we need to be very careful. And so what Jessica said, that keyword, personally identifiable information, PII, you'll hear it much more often once you go into industry. And that's talking about any information that you could use to like figure out who you are. Your name or your email or your social security number, all that stuff is PII. Something you may not realize though is even if you are to not give your name, scrub all your personal information, if you have all this other information, like, okay, this is a male who is 24, who lives in this block of the city, who has parents that are this, like lots of other pieces of information can actually be combined because there's only one person who is like you. And so we have to be really careful when we're working with data that even as we filter down data, if there's too many dimensions, you can actually reverse engineer and figure out who a particular person is just by checking if they match all of the criteria that we have on that person, even if there's no individual thing that's like personally identifiable. And so at Google, at least, we do a lot of thinking about how do we make our data set anonymized such that there is never like a bucket of users that is only one user. Like there's at least X number of people that all have the same criteria, like the same, I guess, fields in this data set. where you can't reverse engineer who that person is. But it's a really big question, Jonathan, and we think a lot about ethics a lot at Google with respect to data as well.
I would recommend looking at the ethics class material from Berkeley. I mean, this is just like the only ethics material I think that I've run into. So pardon me if it's like biased, because that's where I did my undergrad. But let me just quickly see data ethics, the class, if their materials are open source. Let me see.
I think if it's,
Okay, I'm linking the syllabus, or at least the website page. So you can always look at the syllabus for readings that I think are really valuable. We studied data sources, or like articles from like the Cambridge Analytica scandal, when Facebook had that whistleblower that kind of revealed what Facebook was. I mean, Facebook has had so many whistleblowers so on their data stuff. So that's just a whole data ethics case study. But there's stuff about, you know, how ethical was it in the 1960s that the National Institute of Health used data without consent from the Pima Native Americans in Arizona to study like heart disease. It's like a really, there's a bunch of really good case studies on data ethics that I highly recommend you see in the syllabus that I linked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's stop there and let's give Jessica a round of applause. Thank you for coming to talk to us.
Thank you so much for your time and how everyone asked really great questions. Really look forward to, if you want to connect on LinkedIn, feel free. All right. Bye, everyone.